For those of you that may have joined or are joining, I'm Joe Santana. I'm the chairman of the CDO Power Circle. And we now have our third workshop for today. And my presenter today is going to be Lynn Yap for this third segment. Lynn has also been on the podcast. We had a great discussion and we focused a lot on topics that had to do a lot with multi-achievement or getting more done with just one effort. And just before we began this program, in the last program, we were talking about ERG leader burnout and how a lot of people in the DEI space are beginning to feel the pressure, primarily because COVID has added more tasks than people had before. And clearly people are trying to achieve multiple goals. We talked about one way of being able to address that is by revisiting what we're doing and asking ourselves, what should we stop doing that maybe we're doing before? But another way of addressing that as well, which is the topic Lynn is going to cover, is this opportunity that we have to sometimes achieve more than one thing with one effort, so that you end up being more of a, what I call a multi-achiever as opposed to a multitasker. So Lynn is an expert in this. She wrote a book called The Altruistic Capitalist. And if you're going to be a capitalist and you're going to be altruistic, you're going to have the skill to hit more than one goal at the same time. Those goals seem like they're going in different directions, but she obviously has found a way to do that. So I'm glad to have Lynn here now. And Lynn, why don't you go on and take over?
All right, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today to join you. Hope you're all feeling good this Wednesday afternoon. Would love to hear your insights and hear what your stories have been the last few years, particularly during COVID, so that we can exchange and share with each other. As Joe mentioned, today I'm talking about multiplying impact. How is it that we can scale and actually increase our impact for all the business stakeholders? I'm going to start by sharing a story about Best Buy. Now, some of you may remember about 10 years ago, business analysts first calling for Best Buy to close down, shut down its stores, and get rid of a lot of employees because it was a very challenging market at the time. People complained about the customer service, employee morale was low. Late night talk show hosts would make fun of the customer service and how bad it was. It was just really, really frustrating for both the employees, the customers, and Best Buy was really struggling as a business. The other thing that was happening at the time was Amazon came knocking. People were getting used to buying their electronics online. People would go into Best Buy, look at the TVs, look at the computers at the stores, and then it would go online and buy from Amazon because Amazon offered lower prices. And so what they were doing was essentially using Best Buy as Amazon's showroom. Now then, what happened? So what happened was the investors they brought in Hubert Joly, and all his friends and colleagues told him, this is a crazy task. How are you going to win against Amazon? Their competitors such as Circuit City had closed down, and Best Buy was really struggling to remain relevant in the electronics retailer space. But what happened was 7 years later, when Hubert Joly stepped down as CEO of Best Buy, NPS, customer NPS, or Net Promoter Score, had doubled. Employee turnover rate was at its lowest, and they had achieved $2 billion in terms of cost savings. Well, they also doubled their online sales. So then this is the multiple impact again that we were talking about. How was it that Hubert Joly was able to turn around Best Buy, improve employee morale, double sales, and as well as create that NPS, that Net Promoter Score that customers started to love Best Buy again? So two things came out of this. One, he collaborated instead of competed with Amazon. The traditional way of thinking about business was more like a dog-eat-dog mentality, where you would try and best out your competitor and try and beat them out of the market. But what they did instead was Best Buy and Amazon worked together, where they signed actually a multi-year deal where Best Buy would have exclusive rights to sell the Fire TV for Amazon. Now, Amazon, as you know, they don't have showrooms in which they could display their electronics. So what Best Buy did was they gave them a store within the Best Buy store, in which then Fire TV was available for customers to look at, to interact with, and Best Buy employees were trained to educate customers about the product. The other thing was under the Renew Blue campaign, employees were empowered by the Enriching Lives Through Technology purpose. And I'll speak a little bit more as I go through my presentation later on today, and then you'll get a better understanding as how Hubert Joly, the ex-CEO of Best Buy, was able to create this multiple impact, both from a customer, employee, as well as market share perspective. But before I go any further, I want to introduce myself. My name is Lynn Yap. As Joe mentioned, I wrote the book, The Altruistic Capitalist. This is a book about leadership mindsets. I interviewed leaders who use business as a force for good. So whether that is regenerating their environment or contributing to the local communities in which prosperity can be shared for all. I'm also the founder of Activate Network. And through this organization that I started, I deliver workshops for to increase the diversity of women in technology and leadership roles. So what happens under these workshops is that I work with companies and we will have women from those companies participate in the workshops. There are also high school students from the local community that are participants in this workshop. So what happens is the female high school students get role models. They see, oh, there are women who are like me, who are able to succeed. The women practice their leadership, their mentoring and coaching skills in these programs. And together, both the women and the students actually work on a business problem that the company is having at that point in time. So this crosses across, so the workshops actually cross age barriers as well. They bring together women employees as well as high school students to work together on a problem, as well as increase the confidence of both the participants. So through the organization, there is also that multiple impact effect. You have the business getting business insights through the women and high school students working together. The local community, the level of education is increased for the local community as they're trained in leadership. They are also then have role models that they can look up to. They understand then what are the different paths that they can have, and the women then get to practice their leadership and coaching skills, again enabling them to be better leaders in the future. So how can we achieve this multiple impact that is at Activate Network and as well as at Best Buy? And this is what I want to talk about today. I already touched on Best Buy and Amazon, and then I'll spend a little bit of time to talk about why businesses now need to focus more than just profit and sales. And then I go into the 3 different elements that I think are important in which we can create that multiple impact to scale impact for all business stakeholders. First, there is the win-win mindset, there is courageous communication, and there's empowering others. Through each of these 3 elements of multiple impact, I will bring back the example of Best Buy and how Hubert Joly, the ex-CEO of Best Buy, was able to create that multiple impact through these different elements. And so let's get started.
And I'm going to just jump in real quick, Lynn, and say that the ERG is basically a micro-organization. It is an organization. Its goal may be nonprofit to help a community, or its goal may have some profit motivation attached to it as well, which is to help the company save money or make money, etc. But the principles in terms of how you get an organization to achieve more doing less, they're going to be the same.
Exactly. Okay. So, stakeholder capitalism and why this is important right now. I think for a long time we were operating under the Milton Friedman rule, the Milton Friedman philosophy, where the sole responsibility of business is to maximize profits. Now, the Business Roundtable a few years ago sounded the death knell for that, and they said, "Well, now it's no longer profit at all costs. We need to think about the responsibility of business to all business stakeholders." So that's not just the investors in terms of sales and profits, but it's thinking about employees, vendor suppliers, the communities that businesses operate in. How can we help them prosper as well? And the environment, of course, that companies operate in. How might businesses regenerate and protect the environments that they operate in? Following up to that, the World Economic Forum also published proposed 34 stakeholder capitalism metrics, and these are metrics that are that touch on people, the planet, prosperity, as well as governance. So they then listed all these metrics in which then companies can look at them and see how they can create more impact. Again, that multiple impact that we are talking about. And more recently, this year, the SEC as well, they publish a set of non-financial metrics that will probably become mandatory reporting for all companies. These metrics include scope 1, 2, 3 carbon emissions. So that means what are the carbon emissions that companies directly, indirectly create in delivering their business. Now, these type of metrics are very extensive, and to a certain extent, it will take a lot of people, everyone within a company and their stakeholders to work together in order to operate on this. So that is why, as well, I think working together, collaborating with your stakeholders, that will really help with creating that multiple impact. That is really very, very, very pertinent at the moment. The other thing, of course, is not just the consumers that are asking for this. Gen Z, the millennials, they're voting with their wallets and they are looking to brands who are more sustainable. But it's also investors. The amount of money that has gone into sustainability funds and companies that are more sustainable have also doubled in the last few years since the time of COVID. So really thinking about how we might create impact across the business, and not just sales and profits, not just within one area, but across all areas. I think that is really quite important for all businesses today. So how might we create this multiple impact? I think the first thing that we need to think about is how is moving towards that win-win mindset instead of the win-lose mindset. Win-lose is thinking in trade-offs, thinking in a fixed pie. This picture that you see is a dog-eat-dog world, and how is it that we can win over the competition? How is it we can take over market share? Going back to that Best Buy, I mean, if Hubert Joly had gone against Amazon, they would have pumped in a lot of resources in marketing in order to steal market share, or they would have lowered their prices in order to price match, in order to win more market share from Amazon, and that will lead to lost resources. There will be a loss of a lot of effort that's going into that to kill the competition. But instead, think about win-win. Think about how changing that mindset to step aside to the side of the person that you're talking to the stakeholders. Try to be on the same side of the table. How is it that we can move from we versus us versus them and move towards us versus the problem? What is the problem that we're trying to solve together? And so think about expanding the pie, growing the pie, and rather than thinking, okay, this is, if we have this, then we can't have that. So that's, first of all, that's the first thing to get to remember, to move away from that win-lose mindset. And one of the parts, and one of the things that are important in terms of with the win-win mindset is to understand yourself. What is your purpose, and the purpose, your goals, your objectives that you want to achieve. I think that's quite important, because unless you know your purpose, you wouldn't understand what is the problem that you want to solve. And if you know the problem that you want to solve, then you can go to your stakeholders, whether it's your investors, whether it's your employees, or even your vendor suppliers. How is it that you might get transparent with your purpose, with your intentions, and bring others that are more aligned with your purpose a little bit closer? Now, one example that I would like to share here is Paul Polman. At the start of his tenure as CEO at Unilever, he said he wanted to grow the business while reducing carbon footprint. And he was quite aggressive with his goals, and that actually alienated some of his investors. Some of his investors left, but then he actually brought in other people who were interested to support him in that journey to reduce the carbon footprint of Unilever in order to grow the business. So I think while you might alienate people by being transparent about the purpose and intentions, it also brings others who are more aligned with your purpose, who are more aligned with your problem. You have that same problem that you want to solve together. It brings more people to the table and brings more ideas. That's one way in which you can then start to grow the pie. Now, how did Hubert Joly then apply this with his team? Now, what he did was he believed that purpose had to be organic. It had to come to the people who knew the customers themselves. So he talked to the general managers of all his stores. He asked them, all right, what is it that drives you? What is it that's important to you? And of course, the answer that came back was, well, our family, our friends. We want to help people. We want to help the community around us. Now, if he had gone and said, well, we want you to increase online sales, I want you to double our profit margins, that wouldn't have helped. But instead, he empowered his employees and said, all right, what is the purpose? And so they came up with the purpose of enriching the lives of others through technology. He talked to his team members, and this was what they wanted to do. And through this, they actually expanded the market. They found that they wanted to help the elderly live more independently at home for longer. So they invested into mobility devices, devices that would help alert them if there was an emergency at home. And so all of this then expanded their market, and they then became the go-to people, the go-to brand essentially for these type of devices. So that's how Best Buy was able then to create that multiple impact. They were able to energize and excite their team through the purpose, but also expand the market share through this same purpose. And now going to an ERG example, so J&J participated with American Express and with Aetna on a cross collaboration ERG conference. They exchanged insights, and one of the things that came out from this conference together was to embrace the authenticity and uniqueness of each of their ERG groups. They use their ERG groups to test new ideas, and this actually helped them to develop personal brands and to help them help their leaders to stand out from others in the market. So this is another way where, if you go and speak more closely to the people on the ground, to employees, this is one way in which you can also test out new ideas that can help business, but also energize and inspire your employees. So that's the win-win mindset. Moving to the next one. So with a win-win mindset, I mentioned earlier that it's quite important to be clear about your intentions and your purpose and your values. But after that, then we have communication, and this I want to talk about courageous communication. Communication shouldn't be as this image that you see here, which is, typically we think of as one-way traffic when we're speaking to investors. It should be an exchange. Use the opportunity and the time that you have with investors or even vendor stakeholders as a conversation. Ask them how often they would like to be updated. How is it that how might they want to engage or help in achieving that purpose? So have intentional meetings, and this can be not just with investors, not just with vendor suppliers, but also think about some of the town hall meetings. It should be an exchange. There should always be a point in which stakeholders, whoever it is that you're meeting, and these meetings should be different, whether it's vendor suppliers or your investors, they should be tailored to the stakeholders. There should be a time in which you can get their feedback, and so ensure you get that feedback by having regular touch points. Use these touch points as opportunities to exchange insights. Don't treat these meetings with your stakeholders as an obligation to report on progress. Be courageous in sharing what your priorities are. Be vulnerable so that there's more understanding in terms of what is it that you would like to achieve together. I'm going to touch on another example, going back to Paul Polman again. He had the supply chain audited for Unilever, and there were lots of gaps in terms of sustainability. Remember, I mentioned earlier he wanted to reduce the carbon footprint in their supply chain. What they found instead was this huge gap in terms of their supply chain sustainability. And he was very vulnerable in sharing these gaps, and it was very clear what he wanted to achieve. He wanted to close these gaps and be more sustainable. So then the vendor suppliers and Unilever worked together in order to come up with new solutions, to come up with innovations in order to reduce their carbon footprint, and also not just protect but regenerate the environment. So courageous communication is important, and to have that exchange and that conversation in order to create that multiple impact. Moving back then to the Best Buy example, how Hubert Joly did this was he went actually to the stores and spoke to them. It's like, what do you think the problems are? Because this communication is very important. And what he learned was he learned of that showrooming problem that I mentioned earlier. Customers would go into Best Buy stores, touch the products, but then go back into Amazon because they found lower prices on Amazon's website. So what Hubert Joly did was he empowered them to price match. So this was saying, okay, tell us the price that you see online, show us the price that you see online, and we will match that. So he was then able to solve that problem of where customers would use Best Buy stores as the showroom. The other thing that he did was to increase the online sales for Best Buy, was he found out through one of his visits, through one of his conversations with a store employee, that the search engine online was broken. Yeah, the example that was given was when you type Cinderella on the Best Buy store, you would get Nikon cameras. So clearly the search engine was broken. And Hubert Joly then went immediately to fix that. He made the search engine functional, so that was easy and intuitive to use, and that was then able to increase the online sales of for customers as well. And then going to another example in terms of ERGs, they brought together all their different ERGs together on an annual basis, so that their different ERG groups can exchange insights, to learn from each other, to get best practices. But also some of the ERGs then work together to support the local communities. And this helped to not just create that impact for the local community, but it also increased diversity and inclusion within AT&T that helped them develop leaders to help them develop leaders that increase that innovation and employee morale. So that's courageous communication. And now moving on to the final element of multiplying impact. So we have the win-win mindset, thinking about purpose and how is it that we can expand the pie rather than a fixed pie mindset. And there's courageous communication. We're then translating with purpose and our goals and communicating that courageously with all our stakeholders. And here now we're talking about how then we can empower others, especially our employees, to create the more innovative solutions and to come up with solutions together. And this is really thinking, moving away from that top-down thinking mentality where all the strategy and all the ideas for execution come from the top. I think you can double impact and deliver better value to customers, as well as improve employee engagement if you empower your employees. So this is really moving away from this image that you see here, where where everything is what your employees are doing is just carrying out what the top leadership is saying. This is really talking to them, like what Hubert Joly did, talking to employees and finding out, okay, what is it that we can do to come up with better solutions? Because if we are aligned on purpose, as I mentioned before, they can also decide the best way in which they can come up with, they can solve the solution. One way we can do that is to increase opportunities for feedback, be intentional about going to employees, and this is where ERGs could come in. How is it that we can get feedback from how customers are doing, what perspectives are unique to the different markets, to the different customer groups, and also talked with our ERG groups to incorporate some of these insights and feedback into future solutions. Another thing to communicate is to use metrics. This is thinking about using purpose and translating that into success metrics. How is it that we can align all stakeholders in the same direction? Because with these metrics, we can then see how we are progressing towards solving the problem that we have in common. And what Hubert Joly did was, going back to the Best Buy example, when he first arrived, he found out from store managers that there were something between 40 and 50 metrics that they had to think about. So there was really too much reporting and too many things to juggle with. And so he just focused them on two. Said, look, we are losing, we're experiencing declining sales and margins. We really only need to look at these two metrics. And so he empowered the employees to figure out what are the different solutions that they can come up with in order to improve those metrics. Another one is another example I would like to share is from Salesforce. Salesforce worked with their ERG group that focuses on individuals with disabilities at work. And through the initiative at this ERG group, they launched then a customer service team that would develop features that would help make the Salesforce software more accessible for individuals. So individuals who had difficulties using Salesforce software before was then able to access the tools and technologies that was not available to them before. So again, with this collaboration, with this initiative, there was not just empowering and not just energizing their employees and improving morale, but there was also a business value that was delivered to the customers and to the business at the end of the day.
And you know what, Lynn, I wanted to add something else also. And I don't know if you're going to talk about this, and maybe I'm getting ahead of you, but you also, when we were doing the podcast, talked about a specific example with Pearson that I thought was really fascinating because it touched on all these different areas and how an ERG could actually pull all of these things together. Because again, as I said before, it's not hard to make the leap between what someone's doing in a large company to what you could do in this sort of microcosm called an ERG, partner and to do these things. But you presented a really exact example out of an experience you had at Pearson. Don't know if you're going to go there later or if you can go there now, but I think that's a good story to share.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Joe. I wasn't going to because I already had so many different examples, but happy to pick that one up. Pearson, the story with Pearson is an example that came from Activate. And so what I did was I worked with the women's group at Pearson. They wanted to increase the number of women who work in technology within the organization. So I worked with them, and through that we found a number of women to participate in the program. On the other side, I also found a number of students from the local school in a disadvantaged area to participate in this program. They were, of high school age, so they're still thinking about their careers and finding their way in terms of where they want to go to. The other stakeholder group that I engaged for this collaboration, for this partnership, was a business unit. And this was the product design group to design new courses for students, for high school students, for high school and college students, essentially. And they were considering with COVID what was the best way in which they could make their materials more exciting and to reduce that attrition rate for online learning. As you may know, online learning is very hard to sometimes complete a program because there's less touch points and there's less discipline in terms of getting people to finish it. So that was their business problem. They wanted to learn more in terms of how students might be better engaged. So what happened in the end was both women and the students, they worked together to solve this business problem. They did research. The women mentored and coached the students in terms of design thinking. How is it that you can go out and do your research, get insights from the people, from other students in the market. So the women were engaged. They practiced their coaching and leadership skills as well as mentoring skills. The high school students who were participants, they worked with the women. They saw that, these are different careers that I could participate in. And not all the women were in technology, but there were different parts from the organization that they saw that they could see themselves in Pearson in the future. So there was the impact to the students. There was also impact in terms of the women themselves, because the women, it was employees from different parts of the organization, not just from a functional perspective, but also from a geographical perspective. So they created this relationship. They worked with each other. They shared insights as to how to better mentor and coach. They talked with each other in terms of issues that they were having at work. So that created another touch point for them to develop relationships, to give back to community, and to increase their network within Pearson itself. And of course, the business unit that created new products, they were then able to get some insights from the workshop, from the workshop program that they did. They were able to discover they learned new ideas. They got new ideas in terms of how they could entice or help encourage students to stay to complete programs for longer. So that is an example of what I did with Pearson, where there was impact for women employees who were very grateful at the end of the program. They were in fact emotional because they could just give back. But they also helped themselves professionally because they created all these relationships that they wouldn't have had but for the program. The business got some insights from their actual market itself, which they don't always have. And then, of course, the students then they had these role models that they could learn from, as well as develop some leadership skills that they don't have access to at school. So that's an example of a Pearson multiple impact story.
I love that story because there's multiple ways that you can do something like that by partnering across various parts of the organization. And you can basically achieve a number of different goals with one effort. And one of the other things I was thinking about is in organizations, ERGs sometimes compete with each other. Even though they're working for the same company, you'll have them all, they're going to put on a better effort over here and a better program. And to your point, using the story you use between Amazon and Best Buy, sometimes you can get a lot more done if you partner with each other as opposed to trying to outdo each other. And we live in a society where much of the thinking is that competition makes everybody better because they're all struggling to be better than the other person. And that has some truth to it. But also sometimes competition actually hurts us because we're keeping our secret sauce to ourselves. When actually, if we work together, we can all create a larger pie instead of struggling for one zero-sum pie.
Exactly. And we have that already with AT&T as well as with Johnson & Johnson, where they not just brought their ERGs together to learn from each other on an annual conference, but they also work with ERGs of other companies where you then have that regular touch points and learn how to incorporate some of these insights from the ERGs into the business.
I think that's super valuable. The idea of ERGs from companies that are providing a service to another company getting together, I think that has so much value for both companies. There's probably multiple benefits that you can get out of that without having to have all this effort, without having to be the multitasker that's spinning 15 plates.
Exactly. Think about how you can reduce the effort, but by working together, right? Like a lot of times, we just want to solve the same problem, and there's no need to ask for additional resources. That's just that might just be, it might be a better way of solving the problem if we collaborate with others. The other example that I usually like to share is the one of Adidas and Allbirds. They also had a collaboration recently, where both the problems, both companies, both brands, again, competitors in sneakers, they want to reduce their carbon footprint because every sneaker that is usually made emits 2 kilograms of carbon. And so what they did was they actually worked together. Adidas being very strong in terms of design, and Allbirds being very strong in terms of materials. What are new innovative materials that they can create in the market? So the two companies work together and they produce a new sneaker, a new shoe that has the lowest carbon footprint in the market. And that, again, you wouldn't have seen 10, 20 years ago when it was all about taking out the competition and killing the market share, right? Taking control of market share. And I think really we're moving towards more collaboration. How is it that we can use less resources to solve the same problem? Because oftentimes we have a common problem that we want to share, and we can bring others along with us by brainstorming, by sharing insights, and to work together in that way. And that's how you can expand the pie. And instead of thinking, all right, if I have this, you can't have, then you won't have it. And really limiting and not thinking in abundance.
Yeah, I agree totally with you. And I think that not only does that create more work for ERGs, but in organizations, one of the things I wrote a while back was that zero-sum mentality is the enemy of diversity and inclusion, because a lot of times people think to give more opportunities to women is going to take more opportunities away from men. When that's true, if you're thinking of a small pie, let's say if there are 100 positions available, and now 95 of those positions are going to men and 5 to women, and you say, we're going to give 15 to women, well, that means 15 less for the men. But if as a result of your DEI efforts, you're growing the pie, so instead of having 100 positions available, you have 200 positions available, and it's a more lucrative organization because you have more diversity, then you actually have created more value for everybody who's part of the organization, and it's not that zero sum. So I totally agree, and I believe that DEI leaders need to also internalize that because of the way we culturally think in organizations and have thought for many years, that this zero-sum mentality is sometimes one of the unspoken barriers to DEI success, because people are sitting there and thinking, well, if we give more to group A, we have to take it away from group B. And it's important to make the point that you can grow the pie so that group A benefits as group B benefits.
Yeah, exactly. So before I conclude and we move on to questions, just wanted to show the 3 elements again. Step to the side of win-win. Think about your purpose and how you can stay authentic to your purpose and your values. Create regular touch points in which you can communicate the purpose and just be very courageous with how you're communicating that. Remember to share insights and have that two-way conversation where you might develop better solutions together with your stakeholders. And then finally, of course, you empower others. Don't think about just one person, just the person at the top, the leaders at the top having the answer. How is it that we can bring everyone else together? And that's particularly relevant for ERGs as well. How is it that we can use this group that are already together to get their insights and perspectives in order to help with the solutions? I just have a couple of ideas before I close up. I think one way where ERGs can start thinking about this is, identify the purpose, maybe develop a business plan even, and set up goals that actually align with business initiatives. I think this is one way in which you can create multiple impact. Looking at all right, who is it that we have within our group? What are the knowledges that they have? Because these organizations, these ERG groups grow across teams and not just within one team. So how is it that we can actually develop activities and design metrics that align better with business initiatives? And second, and then we touched on this a little bit earlier, collaborate with other ERGs so that we're really expanding that pie. We maybe can launch certain programs together that support the achievement of common goals. And then think about who are the stakeholders that you want in terms of your ERG. Have maybe like a 12-month roadmap. What are the communication and touch points that you want to have with each of these stakeholders for the ERG? And then find opportunities to seek feedback, to be meaningful about your communication, and to get and to develop solutions together. So these are just some ideas that that you might be interested to use that can actually create multiple impact. And I would love to stay in touch and listen to your stories. You can write to me at lynn@altruisticcapitalist.com. I'm also on LinkedIn with Lynn L.Y. Yap. Always welcome feedback, and that's the link there. So I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear what you're doing, and hopefully we can exchange some ideas. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Lynn. That was great. By the way, I was keeping a list over here. I'm going to enumerate it really quickly before we shut off the recording and open up for any questions. So a couple of things that I picked up that I think are really relevant to ERGs. Tip one, partner with other groups, ERGs and non-ERGs, to achieve mutually beneficial goals rather than try to go it on alone. So you could have an ERG where they're all involved in helping the organization to recruit or to retain. You can probably do that with less individual effort on the part of each leader of each ERG if you pool your resources together, as opposed to trying to go it alone or competing with the other ERG to see who could do it better. You can all pool your ideas together. Tip two, connect your ERG to client ERGs and develop common goals across community and business. That was something that you talked about in terms of some of the groups out there. Three, engage your stakeholders and get feedback to exchange insights and narrow down activities that meet your various goals. So find out the different things that people want to do, and then narrow down those to a few things that you can do that meet those multiple goals. Not a separate project for each one of those goals, but one or two things that you can do that can touch on those different goals, a la what you did at Pearson. Four, spread the load across your ERG leadership team and your top members. Get other people engaged. Five, ERGs can be vital to business as a source of community feedback that provides workforce and client insights. I think that's becoming increasingly important as markets become more diverse, and many organizations do not understand the new communities that they're actually trying to sell their products and services to. Six is simple, less is more, right? So have less goals and focus more on a few things and be more effective in those. And then I got 7 and 8. 7 is plan your efforts at as many goals by partnering with various internal and external groups. And 8 is be a developer of others, because the more you develop other people and they become able to pick up some of that load, the more you're able to do without taking on more and more to yourself. So that's what I got out of it. I'm sure that others got some other things out of it, and we'll get some more feedback on that. So with that, thank you again, Lynn. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my camera. I'm going to turn this recording off.